Welcome back to Dylan Pickup's blog. Today we're going to talk more about noise in your guitar. We talked about shielding the other day and that raised a couple of questions, so stay tuned for the answers. Alright, so a couple of questions that came up from our shielding video the other day was, I thought that a Faraday cage had to go all the way around the pickup or around, the chamber that we're trying to shield, and you can't do that with a pickup because the pickup has to be exposed on the top. So what's the point in doing it? Well, the reason basically is this. RF, the noise that comes from fluorescent lights and all that kind of stuff, is actually, the technical term for it is EMI, electromagnetic interference. And it travels in waves, pretty much just like anything else, okay? And it's picked up by those coils in your guitar. And we'll talk about that in just a second, but basically what you have with a pickup is more or less an AM antenna. Have you ever seen those old antennas that were basically, actually they were kind of a, and actually I think if you buy a new stereo, go to Best Buy or something and buy a new stereo, it'll be like a square thing like this, and it'll have two wires coming out of it and you plug it in, but basically all it is a coil going around a plastic core, right? That's an AM antenna. You do that times thousands and thousands on a guitar pickup and you basically have a radio antenna. Well, radio waves can basically smack into the shielding, and you just got to give them a place to go. So when you ground your shielding, it doesn't necessarily need to create a cage all the way around it, although that would be the best, to create a Faraday cage completely around it. Since we physically cannot do that and it's open to the top, the next best thing is to take those EMI, that electromagnetic interference, and bleed them off to ground. That's really why we do it around our pickups. Now the other question that kind of stemmed from that the other day was, I thought that I was getting rid of 60 hertz hum when I was, shielding my guitar. Well, as we said, we're getting rid of RF, or electromagnetic interference. What does electromagnetic interference come from? Well, it comes from an electromagnet. So, just like we are trying to create an AC voltage with our guitar pickup to make noise, anything, and all it basically is pretty much just a little transformer, right? That's all it really is. It's one side of one, it's a coil. So anything with a coil in it, an electromagnet in it, is going to cause electromagnetic interference. This is why, and you can try this, if you took, so here's our circuit box in our house, and we've got one circuit coming off to our bedroom, and we've got one circuit coming off to, let's say, our dining room, and we're playing, our guitar amp is over here in our dining room, and let's say in our kitchen, we'll call this our kitchen circuit, is over here, and we have a 8-foot fluorescent light. Or we have a bunch of those little coily CFLs, fluorescents, because those are popular in houses now. So let's say we have some of those over here in our kitchen, and this is like 5 or 6 feet away, but they're on completely different circuits. And you're like, where's this noise coming from? It's because these transformers in these ballasts of these fluorescent lights are causing that EMI to come across to wherever you're playing, and your guitar pickup and your cable and everything that can pick up that EMI over here, even though they're on completely two different circuits. And you're like, well, that's 60 hertz hum. Well, the thing is sometimes it manifests itself as 60 hertz hum because these transformers are running on 60 hertz. And you're like, well, 60 hertz is really, really low. Isn't that super bass? Well, basically, you're talking about the harmonics of the 60 hertz, so 120, 240. So as it goes up, it's actually more audible, but that's what you're hearing. But anything with a transformer in it, so I'll give you an example. In my living room at home, my TV sits about 4 feet from my guitar amp, and when my TV is on, you know, that's the voltage that drives those tubes in the TV, or well, at least because I actually have an older TV, so the transformer that runs in there, it introduces, when the TV is on, it makes noise in my amp, even though they're on different circuits, because I have done a bunch of experimenting to figure out where to plug it into my house, and I can't get away from it. It's because the EMI in my house coming from the TV. On the other side of my living room, I have a fish tank with a humongous light in it for my big fish tank. Same problem. So I'm stuck. That stuff is just in the room and it's causing EMI unless my guitar is properly shielded and properly grounded. So you shield your guitar, and a lot of people are like, well, I shielded my guitar and it's still noisy, it didn't do anything. Well, that's because that EMI is not the only source of noise for your guitar. So let's talk about that. So we're going to talk about the other source of noise that can happen that sounds like it's coming from your guitar. Okay? And we're going to look at, and something that we kind of forget sometimes, is that the guitar is a circuit, and the tone circuit and the shielding and the pickups and the strings, that's all a circuit itself, right? But what we have to also remember is that the rest of our is one big circuit, because we're sending AC voltage and it's going through our wah pedal and it's going through a bunch of pedals, and these use audio differently, and we're dealing with an unbalanced circuit, which means that the AC voltage that is the signal and the ground is not isolated from that AC voltage. So it's all kind of traveling together and it's going back and forth because and it doesn't go all the way back and forth, right? But it travels back and forth because that's what AC does. So it's going back and forth and back and forth. So, and each of these pedals uses it differently, you know? So if we've got a wah here and a distortion pedal here, and we've got a tremolo and a delay, all those things use it differently. But what we really are concerned about is the fact that our path to ground, so when you go and you touch your meter and you try to check continuity to ground at any point in any one of these pedals, continuity to ground should be perfect. Continuity to ground should be perfect from your wah pedal, your distortion pedal, from any of these things like this, from your guitar amp to ground, from your shielding in your guitar to ground, from your strings to ground. It all should be zero. It should be completely free. The thing is it's never ever a perfect world, because the resistances of cables, the contact points, you know, those little the little AC adapters that plug in your pedals, maybe they're not 100% perfect. Maybe the cables between your pedals aren't 100% perfect. So what can happen is we can end up having not 100% to ground because of some anomaly, because the world is never perfect when it comes to this stuff, and we can create a potential for a AC voltage to go back the other way. So basically all we really want is things to go to ground. But what if this connection, this last pedal right here, the connection to ground's a little iffy, then all of a sudden it's not perfect and we have AC voltage going back the other way and it's carrying AC line noise with it, and it's bringing it back into our guitar signal, and now we have some hum that we didn't want there. So you can shield the guitar all you want and you can get it as quiet as you want, but if the potential to ground at any one of these points is different, then you will create hum in your circuit. And the thing about it is that it will never be 100% perfect. There are things that you can do, like you can use an isolated power supply for your pedals. That'll help quite a bit. Every time you use one of those wall warts to plug in your pedals, so now you have a bunch of pedals down here and they're all plugged in, Remember that each one of those is a transformer. So you're introducing more EMI into the air around your guitar circuit. The transformer in the amp is one. One thing you can do to check all this is go ahead and unplug your amp from the circuit. And if you still have hum coming in, hum from your amp with all this stuff unplugged, then either it's a problem with your amp or the AC voltage is so dirty that your amp can't keep up with it. But usually that'll fix it. If you unplug this and it's 100% quiet, then that means that you have a ground loop somewhere. You have something where the potential to ground has changed, whether it be a bad cable, a bad AC adapter. Sometimes you can't get around it because the way the pedal processes the AC voltage as it comes through, sometimes the circuits are just noisy. Sometimes that's how they are. And the quality of your pedals, and we'll get into this in a different, they can introduce that to it too, just because of their potentials of ground. But the main thing we wanted to talk about in this was EMI, electromagnetic interference, RF, whatever you want to call it, what's commonly called, is not the only thing that causes noise. So you can have, and this is an interesting thing because people asked me about this over the weekend, you can have electromagnetic interference coming from something that is completely not even related to your guitar rig. Dimmer switches are really bad because of the way they work. Fluorescent lights are really bad because of the way they work. Neon lights, all these things are very common in your venues. At home, it'll be fluorescent lights, those CFL coily ones, it'll be TVs, all that kind of stuff. Computer monitors, anything with a transformer in it, including the power supplies for your pedals. So you want to minimize those as much as you can. So you can see how this all works together. Minimize the potential for a bad ground on anything, and minimize the potential for RF to get into your guitar. And remember, creating a good path to ground for your shielding and having it go around as much of the stuff as you can is more important than actually wrapping the whole thing in foil. Okay? Unless you're having problems hearing voices from aliens and whatnot, then I can't help you. Other than that, that's all about noise. Please check us out, DylanMcCurchie.com and for our blog, and DylanPickups.com for our blog. And if you have any questions you want to add to this, if it comes up, something else comes up, let us know and we will add it. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.